The sound echoed before anyone understood what it meant. A palm against weathered skin. Sure. Final. The cafeteria didn't go silent. That would come later. First came the shocked intake of breath. Then the scraping of chairs as inmates turned to look. The elderly man stood perfectly still, his cheek reddening, his eyes fixed straight ahead. The bully grinned. His crew laughed. Nobody noticed the guard at the far door freeze mid-step. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe and comment where you're watching from. Now let's get into it. Walter Hayes was 68 years old when the steel doors of Riverside State Penitentiary closed behind him. His hands shook slightly as the intake officer processed his paperwork. Tax fraud. White-collar crime that should have landed him in minimum security, but overcrowding had other plans. The officer barely glanced up. Another old man caught in the system. Nothing unusual. Nothing threatening. Walter had been a Baptist minister for 40 years. He'd buried the dead, married the living and counseled families through their darkest hours. He'd built a small church in Detroit from nothing, watched it grow, watched his son grow beside it. Now he wore orange and answered to a number. The cell block assignment came without ceremony. Block D. Officer Marcus Hayes delivered the news, reading from a clipboard, his voice professionally neutral even as his jaw tightened. "You'll be in cell 47, Marcus said. Keep your head down. Follow instructions." Walter met his son's eyes. They'd agreed before the trial. No special treatment. No acknowledgement of their relationship. In a place like this, connections were vulnerabilities. Love could become a weapon. "Yes, sir," Walter said softly. Marcus nodded once and walked away. His shoulders were rigid. His hands clenched. But he walked away. Block D was controlled by one man. Darius Reaper Johnson stood 6 feet 3 inches, his body covered in tattoos that chronicled 2 decades behind bars. He'd built his empire on calculated violence and absolute loyalty from his crew. Guards looked the other way because Reaper kept order. His order. His rules. When word spread that fresh meat was coming to the block, Reaper's interest sharpened. An elderly man. No connections. No protection. Easy prey to remind everyone exactly how things worked in his house. Walter's cellmate was a nervous man named Tommy who'd been counting days until release for 6 months. "That bunk's yours," Tommy said, pointing to the upper bed. "Keep your stuff organized. Don't touch mine. And stay invisible for the first few weeks." Walter climbed onto the thin mattress, his joints protesting. "Invisible. Got it." "I mean it," Tommy whispered. "Reaper runs this place. You don't want his attention." Walter closed his eyes. He'd spent his life helping people find peace. Now he needed to find it for himself in a concrete box that smelled of sweat and desperation. The first morning came with harsh fluorescent lights and the clang of cell doors opening. Walter moved slowly, his body stiff from the uncomfortable bed. He dressed in his orange jumpsuit, folded his blanket with careful corners, and followed the flow of inmates toward the cafeteria. Marcus was stationed near the entrance, checking IDs, scanning faces. His eyes passed over his father without pausing. Professional. Detached. But Walter saw the tension in his son's shoulders. The cafeteria was a battlefield disguised as a dining hall. Racial groups claimed their territories. Gang affiliations marked invisible borders. Reaper held court at the center table, surrounded by his crew like a king with his courtiers. Walter took his tray, watery eggs, burnt toast, coffee that looked like oil, and searched for an empty seat. He found one near the windows, away from the center of power, trying to follow Tommy's advice about invisibility. He made it 3 bites before Reaper noticed him. Well. Reaper's voice carried across the room. "Look what we got here, boys. Somebody's grandpa trying to sneak by without paying respects." Conversations dropped to whispers. Inmates turned to watch. Even the guards seemed to find somewhere else to look. Except Marcus. He remained at his post by the entrance, his hand resting on his radio, his face carefully blank. Reaper stood, his massive frame casting shadows across multiple tables. His crew flanked him immediately, feeding off his energy. They crossed the cafeteria with deliberate slowness, savoring the attention. Walter set down his plastic fork and looked up calmly. He'd faced angry congregants, grieving families, and community violence in his ministry. This was just another storm. "I'm talking to you, old man," Reaper said, looming over Walter's table. "In my house, new fish introduce themselves proper. Show some respect." "I apologize," Walter said quietly. "I meant no disrespect. I'm just trying to eat my breakfast." "You meant no disrespect?" Reaper laughed and his crew joined in. "You hear that, boys? He meant no disrespect. But disrespect is what it was. Walter kept his hands visible on the table, his breathing steady. I'm Walter. I'm here for 3 years. I plan to keep my head down and serve my time quietly. Walter. Reaper tested the name like a bad taste. That's a old-fashioned name. You an old-fashioned man, Walter? The kind that don't understand how things work in here. I understand there are rules, Walter said. I'm willing to learn them. Good. Reaper leaned down, placing both hands on Walter's table. First rule is simple. You see me, you show respect. That means standing up when I'm talking. That means answering quick when I ask questions. That means paying a tax for the privilege of eating in peace. Walter glanced at his tray. What kind of tax? Your dessert every meal. Plus whatever money you got coming from commissary. Reaper's grin widened. Consider it protection money. Things can be rough in here for an old man all alone. The word, alone, hung in the air like smoke. At the entrance, Marcus's hand tightened on his radio. Walter was quiet for a moment. In his church, he dealt with bullies before. Men who use size and volume to intimidate. The principle was always the same: show no fear but avoid unnecessary confrontation. I appreciate the offer, Walter said finally. But I'll have to decline. The cafeteria went completely silent. Reaper's face darkened. You'll have to what? Decline. I don't think paying for protection is something I'm interested in. Reaper straightened slowly, his eyes narrowing. You think you're smart? You think because you got some age on you, you can talk to me however you want? Walter met his gaze steadily. I think I'm a man trying to eat my breakfast. Same as everyone else here. It was the calm in his voice that did it. That quiet dignity that suggested Walter wasn't afraid, wasn't intimidated, wasn't going to submit just because someone bigger was standing over him. Reaper's hand came up fast. The slap cracked across Walter's face with enough force to snap his head sideways. The sound echoed through the cafeteria like a gunshot. Walter's cheek bloomed red. His glasses slid askew. But he didn't cry out. Didn't raise his hands to defend himself. He simply straightened his glasses and turned back to face Reaper with the same calm expression. Violence isn't necessary, Walter said quietly. And that's when Marcus moved. Officer Marcus Hayes had served as a corrections officer for 7 years. He'd been trained to maintain professional distance, to treat all inmates equally, to never let personal feelings compromise his judgment. He'd watched his father enter this prison yesterday and forced himself to show nothing. No recognition. No emotion. Because acknowledging their relationship would paint a target on both of them. But watching that hand strike his father's face shattered every protocol he'd been trained to follow. Marcus crossed the cafeteria in long, controlled strides. His face remained professionally blank, but other guards recognized the signs. Officer Chin moved to intercept, but Marcus waved him off. Reaper. Marcus's voice cut through the silence. Step back from the inmate. Reaper turned, his grin still in place. Just having a conversation, Officer Hayes. Old man here was being disrespectful. I was teaching him some manners. I said step back. Marcus positioned himself between Reaper and his father. You just committed assault in full view of security cameras. That's 30 days in solitary and a mark on your record that kills any chance of early parole. Reaper's grin faded. Man slipped. Hit his face on the table. Ain't that right, Walter? Marcus didn't look at his father. Couldn't look. If he did, everything he was feeling would show on his face. Last chance, Marcus said. Back to your table. Now. For a long moment, Reaper didn't move. The cafeteria held its breath. Challenging a guard was serious business. But backing down in front of everyone would damage his reputation. Then Reaper smiled again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. Sure thing, Officer Hayes. Just trying to help the new fish understand how things work. He turned to leave, then paused. We'll finish our conversation later, Walter. When your protector ain't around. Marcus waited until Reaper and his crew were halfway across the cafeteria before he turned to Walter. Their eyes met for just a second. A lifetime of unspoken words passed between them. You all right? Marcus asked, his voice professionally neutral. Yes, sir, Walter replied, equally formal. Thank you. Medical can check that bruise if you need. I'm fine. Marcus nodded once and walked away. His hands were shaking. He clenched them into fists and kept walking. The incident in the cafeteria spread through the prison like wildfire. By lunch, every inmate in Riverside knew that Reaper had slapped an old man and Officer Hayes had shut it down hard. But nobody knew why Hayes had intervened so decisively. Guards usually let inmates handle their own problems. Tommy was waiting in the cell when Walter returned from morning activities. Man, what were you thinking? You can't talk to Reaper like that. And now Officer Hayes got involved. You just made everything worse. Walter sat on his bunk, touching his swollen cheek gently. I didn't ask for any of this. Doesn't matter. Reaper can't let it stand. He'll come for you when the guards ain't looking. And he'll make it hurt. Then I'll deal with it when it comes. Tommy stared at his cellmate in disbelief. You really don't get it, do you? You're going to get killed over a piece of cornbread and some prison politics. Just pay the man and live quiet. Walter was quiet for a long time. I spent my whole life teaching people about dignity. About standing for what's right even when it costs you. I can't stop now just because the audience changed. This ain't a church, old man. This is prison. Different rules. Maybe, Walter said. But some principles don't change no matter where you are. Marcus stood in Warden Patricia Hawthorne's office, his jaw tight, his hands clasped behind his back. Hawthorne reviewed the security footage on her computer, her expression unreadable. You intervened quickly, Officer Hayes. Some might say too quickly. Reaper assaulted an inmate in my presence, ma'am. I followed protocol. Protocol says you radio for backup and observe until additional officers arrive. You went in solo and confronted the most dangerous inmate in Block D. She paused the video. Want to tell me why? Marcus kept his expression neutral. The situation required immediate intervention. The situation was contained. Reaper was walking away. You escalated. With respect, ma'am, Reaper made a threat. We'll finish our conversation later. That's premeditated assault. I put him on notice. Hawthorne leaned back in her chair. Tell me about Walter Hayes. The question hit Marcus like cold water. Ma'am? Same last name. Same facial structure. Same mannerisms. Hawthorne's eyes were sharp. You think I don't do my homework? Walter Hayes, age 68, convicted of tax fraud. One son, Marcus Hayes, age 32, corrections officer. You want to revise your explanation? Marcus felt his carefully constructed walls crumbling. It's my father. I know. I didn't request special treatment. I've maintained professional distance. Until today. He was assaulted right in front of me. What was I supposed to do? Hawthorne was quiet for a moment. You were supposed to let him handle it? Or let another officer intervene? Because now Reaper knows there's a connection. And that makes both of you targets. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Reaper doesn't know. Reaper's been in prison for 20 years. He reads people better than most psychologists. He saw your face when you crossed that cafeteria. He saw how you position yourself. And even if he didn't, word spreads fast in here. Hawthorne closed the video file. By tomorrow, every inmate in Riverside will know Walter Hayes is your father. So what do I do? Your job. Protect all inmates equally. Don't show favoritism. And pray Reaper doesn't decide to use your father as leverage. Marcus left the office feeling like the walls were closing in. The attack came 2 days later during afternoon recreation. Walter had been using the time to walk the yard, staying near the perimeter fence where guards had clear sight lines. He'd learned quickly that visibility was protection. As long as officers could see him, most inmates kept their distance. But the yard was large and sight lines had blind spots. Reaper and 3 of his crew intercepted Walter near the weight benches, boxing him in with practiced efficiency. Other inmates suddenly found somewhere else to be. Thought we'd finish that conversation, Reaper said pleasantly. The one your boy interrupted. Walter stopped walking. Running would be useless and undignified. I don't want trouble. Should have thought about that before you disrespected me. Before you brought a guard into our business. Reaper stepped closer. See, that's the problem with people like you. You think rules and respect are the same thing. They ain't. What do you want from me? An apology. On your knees. In front of everyone. Walter glanced around the yard. Dozens of inmates watching. Guards too far away to intervene quickly. This was the moment Tommy had warned him about. I won't do that, Walter said quietly. Reaper's smile was cold. Then we do this the hard way. The first punch came from behind, a kidney shot that dropped Walter to his knees. Pain exploded through his lower back. Before he could recover, a kick caught his ribs, driving the air from his lungs. Stop. A voice cut through the yard. Marcus was running, his radio already calling for backup. But he was 30 yards away and Reaper's crew was just getting started. A boot caught Walter's shoulder, spinning him onto his back. He curled up, protecting his head and vital organs, lessons from childhood in Detroit streets coming back. Don't fight back. Survive. Wait for help. Another kick. Another. Reaper stood over him, orchestrating the beating with cold efficiency. Then Marcus arrived like a storm. Officer Marcus Hayes hit Reaper with a textbook tackle that sent both men crashing into the dirt. They rolled, fists flying, all protocol forgotten in the fury of a son protecting his father. Other guards arrived within seconds, pulling Marcus off Reaper, restraining the crew members, restoring order through sheer numbers and riot gear. But the damage was done. Marcus knelt beside his father, his hands shaking as he checked for injuries. Dad, can you hear me? Walter's eyes fluttered open. Blood ran from his split lip. His breathing was shallow. I'm all right, son. You're not all right. Medical. We need medical now. Marcus. Walter's hand found his son's arm, his grip surprisingly strong. You can't do this. You can't risk your job for me. I don't care about my job. I do. Walter's voice was firm despite the pain. You worked too hard to get here. I won't let you throw it away. The medical team arrived with a stretcher. As they loaded Walter onto it, Marcus stood slowly, becoming aware of the eyes watching. Every inmate in the yard. Every guard. The entire social structure of the prison had just witnessed a corrections officer break every rule to protect one specific inmate. Officer Chin approached carefully. Marcus, you need to step back. Let us handle this. Marcus looked down at his hands. They were covered in dirt and blood. Reaper's blood. His father's blood. The line he'd sworn never to cross had just been obliterated. Yeah, Marcus said hollowly. Yeah, I'll step back. Warden Hawthorne's office felt smaller this time. Marcus stood at attention, his uniform cleaned but his face still showing the aftermath of the fight. A bruise darkened his jaw where one of Reaper's crew had landed a punch. Assaulting an inmate, Hawthorne said, reading from a formal report. Abandoning your post. Endangering other officers by creating a riot situation. And violating department policy regarding personal relationships with inmates. She set down the report. Give me one reason I shouldn't fire you right now. Marcus had spent 2 days in administrative leave preparing for this moment. Because I'd do it again. Hawthorne raised an eyebrow. That's your defense? No defense. Just honesty. He's my father. I watched him get beaten and I reacted. I'd react the same way tomorrow. Then you understand why you can't work here anymore. Marcus nodded slowly. Yes, ma'am. However, Hawthorne pulled out another file. Your father is being transferred to minimum security where he should have been assigned initially. The overcrowding situation has been resolved. He'll serve the remainder of his sentence in a facility better suited to non-violent offenders. Marcus felt something loosen in his chest. Thank you. Don't thank me. Thank the security footage that shows Reaper initiating the assault. Thank the 3 inmates who gave statements about his extortion attempts. And thank your service record which, up until this week, was exemplary. Hawthorne stood. You're suspended for 30 days without pay. Use that time to decide if you can separate personal feelings from professional duty. If you can't, find another line of work. And Reaper? Transferred to administrative segregation pending criminal charges. He assaulted an elderly inmate on camera. The DA is interested. Hawthorne's expression softened slightly. Your father is safe, Officer Hayes. Now make sure you don't throw away your career trying to prove something that's already been proven. Marcus visited his father in the infirmary that evening. Walter sat propped up in bed, his ribs wrapped, his face bruised but his eyes clear. Heard you got suspended, Walter said. 30 days. Could have been worse. Could have been better if you'd followed protocol. Marcus pulled up a chair, suddenly feeling like a child again being lectured about right and wrong. You were getting beaten. What was I supposed to do? Your job. Let the other guards handle it. Trust the system. The system put you in Block D with Reaper in the first place. Walter was quiet for a moment. True. But that was bureaucracy, not malice. You can't protect me from everything, son. And you shouldn't have to. You're my father. I'm also an inmate. There's a difference between those two things in here. Has to be. Marcus felt tears threatening and forced them back. I couldn't just stand there and watch. I know. That's what makes you a good son. But you need to be a good officer too. Those things can't always coexist. So what do I do? Walter reached out and took his son's hand. You serve your suspension. You think about whether you can continue working here with me inside. And if the answer is no, you find a different facility. I'll be transferred soon anyway. To minimum security. I heard. See? The system works. Eventually. Walter smiled despite his split lip. I'm proud of you, Marcus. Not for breaking rules but for caring enough to want to. That's the man I raised. Just remember, caring doesn't always mean intervening. Sometimes it means having faith that people can handle their own battles. Marcus returned to work 30 days later to a prison that felt different. Inmates treated him with a mixture of respect and caution. They'd seen him cross the line for family. That made him both more human and more unpredictable. Reaper was gone, transferred to Supermax. His crew had scattered without their leader, finding new alliances, new hierarchies. Walter was gone too, settled into a minimum security facility 2 hours away. They talked on the phone every Sunday, conversations that were careful and monitored and filled with things they couldn't say directly. Officer Chin approached Marcus during lunch duty. Good to have you back. Good to be back. Your father doing all right? Yeah. Better facility. He's teaching Bible study to the other inmates. Chin smiled. Sounds about right. Hey, for what it's worth, what you did was stupid. But I get it. If it was my dad. He trailed off. Just don't make a habit of it. Don't plan to. That evening, Marcus wrote a letter to his father. Not an email, not a monitored phone call, but a physical letter that would take days to arrive. Dad, I've been thinking about what you said. About being a good officer and a good son. About how those things can't always coexist in here. I think you're right. But I also think you taught me something more important. That some things are worth breaking rules for. You stood up to Reaper over a piece of cornbread because it was about dignity, not food. I broke protocol because family matters more than policy. I'm not saying I'd do it again the same way. But I'm not saying I wouldn't either. The transfer was the right call. You're safer there and I can do my job here without constantly worrying. Distance creates space for both of us to be who we need to be. But when you get out in 3 years, I'm taking a month off. And we're going fishing. Somewhere without walls or rules or anyone watching. Just father and son. The way it should be. Love, Marcus. 3 weeks later, Marcus received a response. Son, your letter arrived during Bible study. I read it twice before I could put it away. You're right about dignity. That's what the confrontation was really about. Not cornbread or politics, but maintaining the sense of self that places like this try to strip away. I couldn't let Reaper take that without at least standing for something. You did the same thing. You stood for family. For love. Those aren't weaknesses even when they complicate your job. I'm proud of the officer you've become. But I'm prouder of the man you've always been. The one who cares too much and feels too deeply and still shows up every day trying to do right by people. That fishing trip sounds perfect. I'll hold you to it. 3 years seems long right now. But it'll pass. And when it does, I'll walk out of here the same man who walked in, just a little wiser about the difference between rules and principles. Take care of yourself. And remember, some battles are worth fighting even when you can't win. You taught me that. Love, Dad. Marcus folded the letter carefully and put it in his locker. Then he went back to work. The cafeteria needed monitoring. Inmates needed counting. The system needed good officers who understood that justice wasn't always simple, that right and wrong sometimes wore the same uniform. He'd made his choice. He'd broken protocol and faced the consequences and learned that some things, like the sound of a hand striking your father's face, echo longer than any punishment. But he'd also learned that standing up for people you love isn't weakness. It's human. And staying human in a place designed to strip humanity away might be the most important job of all. The doors opened. Inmates filed in. And Officer Marcus Hayes watched them all with eyes that had seen what happened when love and duty collided, and refused to regret the impact. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.